Well, I think we might as well start. It's so lovely to see you all, and thank you for signing on to the course. I'm Anne Fennell. I'm chair of Mothers at Home Matter, and I've also been a student at the philosophy school for some years. Just to give you a very little background, the aims of Mothers at Home Matter are three: to promote an understanding of child's development needs, particularly when they're very young, to enhance the status and self-esteem of mothers and fathers, those who sort of give up a career particularly to work, but also to speak of the importance of the work that is done raising children. And also we campaign for a level playing field so that the choice to care is an option for people, because at the moment it's very difficult to make the choice to be at home to care. The reality of the economic situation is that you need two incomes to work, to pay the bills. The philosophy school, it sort of helps people answer those big questions, and it helps find a way of living a more mindful and conscious life. So the idea of the aim of this course, this parenting course, is to really understand the role of parent, to understand the value of mother, the value of father, our relationships with our partners, with ourselves, with our children, and to understand why the role of raising children is so important. Today, mothering and fathering are little valued. There's no paid transaction, and so it's not really seen as productive. But what we do when we raise our children, when we care, is so important. It counts enormously. There are many challenges, high living costs. There are few support systems really for families today. We live very isolated from each other. Connection with church, with local communities are very weak. And so actually parenting can be very daunting. It can certainly be isolating and challenging. So we're here to really help you in any way we can in looking at some of the key development areas and some of the key challenges, some of these challenges that all of us face as we parent. A child lives in a very different world to us. Unless you become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I wonder what Jesus meant when he said that. But a child's world is very different. It's not bound by busy schedules, by timekeeping. They don't worry if the bills aren't paid. They see the magic of spider webs, of snails, of trains. So how do we marry the two different worlds, and how do we meet the children at their level whilst we still pay the bills and get to places on time? So we have 4 weeks to explore this wonderful world of parenting, and it'd be lovely to do it together. We really would like to have your input, would love your questions, so please do question and give your real life experiences, because that's when these sort of talks come alive. One of the principles in the philosophy school is don't accept or reject anything, but go away, reflect, and come back. Tell us if it's worked. Tell us if any of these tips and practices that we give you work. And it'd be lovely to hear next week whether anything does work. I'd like to now introduce our lovely speaker, Hilary. She's going to talk to us about emotional resilience, and she just told us she's had to practice it very hard this week with a lost granny and all sorts of things, and her husband's broken shoulder. So she's a mother of two lovely girls and now a grandmother. Hilary's worked in the teaching profession for over 30 years, and I believe been a head teacher for about 15 of those in different schools. Hilary ran a creche for many years, which I went along to. And one thing about Hilary was she was always smiling. I don't think I ever saw you got cross. And she just was just a wonderful example. She would always meet the children at their level. And I suppose you can tell us how you did it now, because yeah, she was just a lovely person. So without any more ado, I'm going to pass you to Hilary.
And thank you for that lovely introduction. I wish you were all in a room together. I really find it hard talking to you on a screen, because the most important thing is that presence and actually being together. Looking at the chat, you've all got probably far more experience than I have actually. And it's very hard to advise people on how to bring up children, how to grandparent children, because in my 30 years of, well, more than that, working with children, what you realize is every child is different. Every child's unique, and they all respond in completely different ways to what we present them. And that's what I love about my job as a head teacher. I'm also an inspector for the Independent Schools Association, for ISI. So I go into a lot of schools and I see a lot of children. And what really interests me is how there are some children that seem to naturally bounce when there are challenges, and some children who do not seem to bounce and who find it much more difficult. So I'm actually fascinated in both emotional contagion, I've spoken quite a lot on that, but how we as adults help to develop this emotional resilience in children. And it is so important that we do. So I prepared a few slides. So what is resilience and why is it important? So the actual term resilience, it wasn't used until the early 17th century. And I was fascinated to learn that it comes from re, meaning back again, and salio, to leap or spring, bound or jump. And what we find is there are some children who leap, spring, bound or jump, whatever seems to happen to them. And there are other children who, they get one spelling wrong and they crumble and they're very hard to kind of change their mood. So I think this ability to bounce back is something that we need to be looking at, how to help our children to become more resilient. Because in these days, we have this decline of mental health in children and in adults, increase in self-harm, even in primary schools, and children are actually contemplating suicide. And I believe that if we can have a look at this resilience and help to build it in children, maybe we can make a difference to their mental health as well. So in physics, is this ability of an elastic material to absorb energy, such as from a blow, and release the energy as it springs back to its original shape. So what we're going to be looking at today is a person's ability to bounce back after a setback, and the ability to recover or adjust easily to misfortune or change. So what I've been looking at is a little bit of the science behind it, and I've been looking at some practical examples as well. At the end of the talk, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things that might help at home. As I say, I think I'm speaking to many people who have already probably practiced a lot of this, but it's something we can discuss. So let's have a little look at this. So I've been looking at, this has come from the Center on the Developing Child by Harvard University. They're people who have been studying resilience for many years. And they're saying that science tells us that some children develop resilience while others do not. And understanding why some children do well despite adverse early experiences is crucial, as it can inform effective educational programs. So when we look at what we do at school, I'm also the head of St. James Prep School, a school that has a very philosophical base. We're looking all the time at how to improve the education and how we can actually help our children to become more able to deal with adversity and stress. So what this is actually saying, the science is saying that some of it is biological. And you would probably know, Anne, having 6 children, you think you're kind of doing the same thing as a parent, but one copes better than another. So you do have the biological side of it as well. But it's suggested here that there can be protective experiences and coping skills that we can actually teach children so that they can become more resilient. So this balance, I love this kind of balancing thing, the fulcrum here. So you may not be able to read it very well, but it's got positive outcomes on one side and then it's got negative outcomes on the other. And this Harvard study is fascinating. It's actually suggesting that if children have enough positive outcomes, and we're going to talk about relationships in a minute, this can help them to deal with lots more negative experiences. And that balancing act we're trying to build in our young people at St. James, we're trying to build this ability to cope with stress, to cope with difficulties which are inevitable. So here we have, this is a fascinating study, Harvard University, the Center on the Developing Child. This is really interesting for us, especially when we're talking about parents at home. What they have studied for many years is twins and groups of children who've had similar experiences. And what they have said is the single most common factor for children who develop resilience is at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive parent, caregiver, or other adult. So I'm just going to pause there a moment, because this is, when you look back on your life, look back on your childhood now for a moment, and just think of those people in your life who have given you that sense of being a support for you. Just think back right now, and this is really important, because if a child does not have this, if there are too many different adults in their lives, if they're coming and going, it's very hard for that child to build that deep understanding of themselves. So this is actually saying that these relationships provide a scaffolding and a protection that buffer them from developmental disruption. So this is where, Anne, a lot of the work that you're doing, and a lot of the work that Rebecca's been working on as well, this is talking about the importance of these relationships for helping to protect children against these buffers, you know, when life gets difficult. They build key capacities, these relationships, the ability to plan for the future, so that with that caring adult, they can actually think of the next step. It helps them to regulate their behavior, so that they're not just instantly reacting to what's going on. They've got the adults supporting them, and it helps them to adapt to diversity and thrive. So this is a real key to what I'm talking about today. So I had a look at this lady, Therese Lewis. If you want to have a look, she's got a wonderful TED talk. And I'm really interested in people who've had really difficult lives, lots of adversity. And the odds were all against Therese Lewis. She should really not have been a success that she was, if you looked at her life experience. She was born into a family where she was exposed to violence and poverty, and her mother was not around. She had a really, really difficult life. And when you listen to her TED talk, she said the one thing that made the difference to her life was her sister, who at the age of 18 adopted Therese. She actually adopted her at the age of 18, got herself a job, and looked after Therese. And what then happened was Therese has now looked at other children. She's now a TED Talk speaker. She's done a lot of work working with children who have come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And she is saying that adversity is guaranteed. And what she finds is that in the education system is we help children once they're in a difficult position. So once they've experienced adversity, we then help them afterwards. But she is saying in her talk, which I absolutely agree with, that we should teach them before they have adversity. So adversity is guaranteed. There will be difficulty in our lives, but we actually need to teach them from the beginning how to deal with it when it comes, how to prepare them for life. And I loved this. She was talking about, there's a wonderful book called The Other Westmore. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but this is one of her favorite books. And it's about two boys who grew up in Baltimore in an impoverished situation. no fathers, run-ins with the police. And it looked as though both boys' lives would be the same. But one became a White House fellow and a decorated veteran, and the other ended up in prison with a life sentence. And she was fascinated at seeing what was the difference between these two. And her big thing is the difference was resilience. And what she's saying is we need to teach resilience so that when anyone is in a difficult situation, they can cope and come out the other side. Now, she's been looking at how do we build resilience? And her conclusion, the same as Harvard, was one solid answer: building strong relationships. This is the one key that she has found when she's been working with a plethora of young people. Having that strong relationship is absolutely key to their survival. Now, she's absolutely wonderful. She was saying that, similar to the Harvard study, significant adults give children a strong inner voice. This inner voice is developed by the people around them. So we all know this. If we think back to our childhood, there are certain sentences that a teacher might have said to us, or a parent, that shaped how we dealt with things. And she's actually saying that we are giving the children their inner voice by what we say to them. And in my work on emotional contagion, I've been looking very carefully at tone of voice as well. So children pick up on the tone of voice, they pick up on what we say, and they take those words and turn them into their own sentences, their own inner voice. So everything we say to a child as a teacher, as a parent, as a grandparent, every single thing we say to them can become one of these formative sentences, like a life sentence. So I remember being told very young, there are 4 children in my family, and I had 2 sisters who seemed to sail through the education system, and I was not like them. So the teachers were going, you're not like your sisters, you're not as clever, you find things difficult. And I ended up outside the head's office being the naughtiest child in the school for a long time, which is why I can deal with the naughty ones. But it was only one teacher who actually kind of recognized that there was something in my spark, which was why I was being so naughty. I was quite bored, and actually said, no, you have huge potential. You have huge potential. I can still remember that teacher who kind of saved me from being completely delinquent at school. But these sentences, we'll all have them inside us. These have come from the adults and the important adults in our lives. So I love Teresa's answer. She reckons there are 4 things we need to teach children. So one of them is that adversity is not personal. Now, this is really interesting because a lot of children that I work with, they actually believe they are responsible for their parents' breakups. They actually believe they are responsible when things go wrong in their homes, which have nothing to do with them. So Teresa was saying we teach children that struggling is a part of life. Forgiveness. She said forgiveness is really important. We have to cut out this core of anger, hatred, and fear, and children need to let go of negativity. So when we're thinking about dealing with children who have had a conflict with one another in school, for instance, we're talking to them about forgiving each other. And then they can move on. If they don't, they get stuck in this cycle of anger, resentment, frustration, and they put that onto the next relationship. So I think Teresa was quite wise with this one as well. This is really important. She thinks that this is what an adult should be saying to every child that they meet and who they're having an influence on their lives. I see you, and I care about you. And this is really difficult for us when a child is misbehaving. I get children sent to my office who have been disruptive, or the teachers found them difficult to deal with. And one thing I always do, I sit them on the sofa and I say to them, I'm here. I want to hear what's going on with you. And they know I care about them. And I think that makes a big difference to the way they want to then behave better. And as a parent, it's very easy when you're busy, when you've got a lot on, to go through the day without actually seeing your child and telling them that you care about them. So I think this is another thing for building their resilience, because this will go into their inner voice. I see you this morning, I care about you. And she also said, which I thought was a lovely answer, was to teach children it's okay to need other people. As parents, we're very, very keen to show that we are copers. We are very keen to show that we're getting on with life fine. But actually, it's quite good for a child to see a parent say to somebody else, I need your help. I need your help. And she's saying that's really good as a role model. So I'm going to talk to you about some practical tips for building that strong, meaningful relationship. These are as your child is growing up, or when you're dealing with younger children especially. So children, as we know from a lot of the research, children will mimic everything you do. They mimic your tone of voice. They mimic the way you handle missing a bus. They mimic the way you handle traumatic situations. They're watching you. And if when the bus goes past and it didn't stop for you, you shout and scream and swear and get all angry, I can guarantee your child will have a very similar reaction next time they miss a bus. They're learning from everything you do. I have parents who come in and they're stressed and they're dragging a stressed child behind them. And what happens in the playground? The child's stressed and not dealing with things very well. So you need to look at your own emotional resilience yourself. And I think for me, this whole thing about being that role model for your child, and you can actually say, I'm feeling really stressed right now, but I'm going to practice some relaxation techniques. They're living in your emotional atmosphere. Grandparents, parents, children are living in the atmosphere we create. We're not even aware of it, but they're picking up on stresses, especially between the adults in the house. So they know exactly what's going on, even little ones. So it's actually okay to have an age-appropriate sharing of what you did when things were difficult. With my girls, I used to get home from work and go, oh my gosh, I've had a really bad day. And, I found this really difficult. And even when they were small, I used to share things that I'd found difficult and stressful. And we are still the best friends. We talk about everything. And my daughter's still, we're WhatsApping each other and messaging each other. And I think this happened because I used to share a lot when they were very little and continue to do that. So this we all know, everybody's telling us this all the time, but being emotionally present whilst with them. Now, I know people are worried about what children are doing online and what they're doing on their mobile phones, but for me, I'm even more worried about what the adults are doing when the children are around. So I see parents who've got their mobile phones on a stick, one of those sticks, while they're pushing the pram. And so the child is not getting the eye contact, the child is not getting any interaction with the adult. I think if you can, as a family, as a home, actually decide that the adults are going to be the role models for using technology. They are not going to have them at the table. The adults go, oh, I'm going to turn off my phone now. This is time for you. I know it's not practical all the time, but to actually have times when we say, no screen time for any of us, and mummy and daddy need to switch their phones off as well. So I think that's really important. At school on a Friday, I have tea and toast with my year sixes and then later with my year fives. The smell of toast releases endorphins and it helps children to relax. And we literally have teapots and cups and saucers and toast. And I give the year sixes, when they're feeling stressed and coming up their exams, every week a half an hour of my time to sit and talk about how they're feeling. And I can tell you, toast jam and Marmite and a cup of tea, they'll start to talk about anything. If you haven't got time in the evening to all sit down and have a meal together, just when they get home from school, sit down and have a cup of tea. It really does help. They can have a herbal tea, just make that a bit of a tradition. Meal times. We're finding children are coming into school, they cannot use cutlery. These are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11-year-olds cannot use their cutlery. So we actually have, you know, how to use our knife and fork lessons, having meal times together, even if it's only once a week, but make that a tradition in your family. Really important. Lay the tablecloth out, and talk and listen and model that listening and that talking. Children need consistency. A lot of our children have two families that they will go to one parent for a weekend, another parent for the week, or they'll have, a lot of our children have two families, or they may even have three because they'll be going off to grandparents. The most important thing for those children is consistency. So those adults that are looking after the children, even if they can't bear talking to each other, those adults that are looking after the children, they need to talk about what routine those children are going to have. We get parents going off, well, the children go mad in the holidays. Part of that is a lack of routine. So it is actually suggested for consistency that you try and have the same times during the day, even in the holidays, as they might have at school. And everybody needs to have the same rules, and that will help the children to remain stable. Family virtues. We have core values at St. James, so the children are rewarded for, we call it elasticity, for being elastic. That's our resilience virtue, but they actually get house points for showing resilience. They get house points for being caring and respectful. But you could at home have a similar system where you're actually targeting the praise. So you're not just saying, well done, well done. You're saying, well done, I've seen how resilient you have been. You really tried hard at that. I'm so proud of you for being kind. Target it and have kind of sticker charts with the family virtues, and decide with all the adults that are looking after the children, what are the virtues we want to be espousing to get our children to be following. Develop their inner voice. Schools these days, a lot of them the children will not be learning hymns in the same way that we learned them. They will not be having the same prayers, poems, learning things off by heart. So you can have that role. You can share with them the songs that you loved as a child or you loved at school. Share the hymns, the prayers, the poems, and recite them together. And this will become part of their inner voice. So Terry Waite, when he was in solitary confinement, the thing that stopped him going mad was remembering the hymns and the prayers from school. And if you think of our children when they're bored or lonely, what's going through their minds, you could have given them the song that helps to keep them going when things are tough. So, end of each day, if possible, sit down with the child or the children or even the teenagers that you're looking after and talk about what you were grateful for that day. Gratitude is really important for building resilience. And if you write down as well what you're grateful for, you could have your own gratitude diary that you share with your child and say, I'm so grateful for what happened today. I'm so grateful for you. Little children, when they come home from school, they don't want to tell you what they've done during the day. And this, we have a real problem with parents again. They never talk to us about what they've done. So get them to draw what they've done, or get them to colour or paint a picture of how the day made them feel. Did it make them feel red and angry, or did it make them feel calm and green? Find other ways to share how the child has been and their experience. So draw how the day was, but also model it and do that with them. So the most important thing for children is to build their self-awareness. People who've been in the philosophy school have been developing self-awareness skills for many years. At school, every child knows this. If you feel stressed, take 3 deep breaths. The children all have in assemblies, we start with one hand on our chest and one on our tummy, and the children close their eyes and they all take 3 deep breaths. And I've had parents saying their children have stopped them in the supermarket and told them to take 3 deep breaths. And the parents say it's just so practical. If you feel stressed, take 3 deep breaths. And you'll see the children doing this before they pause at school. Really helps. How am I feeling today? Sit down with your child, if it's on the weekend or the holidays. How are you feeling? How are you feeling today? Are you okay? And then there are emotion changes. So obviously music, exercise, going out together. Change that emotion if it's a really negative, if they're really upset about something. Look at emotion changes. And there's a thing called zones of regulation, which I can post later if you're interested in that. That's a color-coded zones of regulation, and the children can talk to you about which color zone they are in. And we're all trying to get to green, which is nice and calm. So the present moment, the pause. Obviously, philosophers online would have been doing this for years, but the children at St. James, they pause for a moment, they connect with their senses, and then they dedicate every action and every lesson to their highest self. And then at the end of the lesson, they dedicate what they've done back to their highest self. And that's a good way of letting go. So you've tried your very best, you've tried to be your very best self, and now it's time to let that go. Give it back to the universe. You can use this at the end of a day as well, for the children to give back, let go of the day. If they've made mistakes, if it's been difficult, let it go, and teach this. So really important. Obviously, we all know about the stress busters. This is not new to anybody, but in my garden, I've got an old rusty set of weights. And when I've got a really challenging day, or I've got to write my inspection report, I go outside and I get my weights and I go, I can do this. I can do this. I literally do. And I tell the children I do that. And a bit of fresh air, lifting some weights, and it can change your mood. Sleep, it's a whole science. I'm sure all of you have been looking at how to get good sleep hygiene for the children you look after. That's so important. And obviously diet, etc. So here we have. I love this picture. So one of the most important things really as a family is to do things together. And if you can find a common activity, this family actually built a whole house together. So they've been doing bricklaying and building foundations. This is the Fennel boys. Absolutely lovely picture. But it's so important to share fun things with your child or with your grandchild. The growing up stage passes like a flash when you look back on it. And it's actually supposed to be fun. You should be enjoying these young people that you've got and doing things together, rather than trying to get through it and get through another day and cope with another day. It's actually supposed to be fun. So I think really strong families have fun. And I don't want you to forget that bringing up children, teaching children, being a grandparent is supposed to be enjoyable. And you should be teaching those children that life is a gift and every day should be a fun and wonderful experience. And building their resilience through these coping strategies can help them to have more fun and see that life is actually supposed to be happy. So that's the end of my little talk. I hope you found it useful. So I'm going to stop my screen share now.
Well, thank you, Hilary. That was amazing. I've made so many notes.